Commit to your brand, man. Commit to your brand, bro. Whatever it is.
So here we are. Welcome, Philip. It's great to see you as always, my friend.
As always.
Let me just introduce you really quickly to people that might be tuning in and watching. This is Philip Folsom. He is a very good friend of mine, but more importantly, he does work with tribes, with communities, with organizations, with teams. He's worked with some of the biggest brands in the world. In executive coaching, he's a super duper master ropes course instructor, like probably the most experienced rope course instructor in the universe.
Possibly.
He's a Carver skateboard rider, and just an awesome fellow. So, and he does a lot of work with veterans and does a lot of work with men's groups. But you can see from his brand, Wolf Tribe, the day of the lone wolf is over, right? So let's get together. Let's be together. And I couldn't think of a better person to talk to about community in this isolation that we're in. That's why I wanted to have you on and talk to you about it.
Cool. Yeah, really pleasure being here. I love hanging out with you. Any chance to hang out with the Andy P is a win. So it's all good.
Did I leave anything out? Is there anything more that you need to?
No, it's great. Thank you I feel edified. Thank you.
Excellent.
Legitimized, affirmed, edified.
I don't even know that word, edified. What does that word mean?
Oh, it just means to build somebody up and legitimize them.
Oh, cool.
So let me edify you. There you go. That's it. A good introduction would edify you, prepare you.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, hey, connection's a great place to start with this because that's the big topic today. And I'm in definitely a phase of my life where I want to shine as much light on my tribe as possible. And this is one of the markers of having a really resilient and connected collaborative tribe is that it's win-win. And a lot of times there's this weird competition underneath the surface of people who are in the similar fields that could be allies, but instead they're competitive. And a lot of times when your potential allies win, and if you feel this little bit of like, ooh, I wish that was me, I hope they don't win too much, that's a really good marker of isolation and kind of some unhealthy conflict of that. And then when the people who are on your tribe just celebrate the crap out of your wins. And really it's the difference between pride-based cultures and honor-based cultures. And honor-based cultures like sports or the military or people who are like in the whole life challenge team, when you're celebrating each other's successes, it's because you're celebrating the collective success. Their success is your success.
I want to talk a little bit about that. I was fascinated. I went out and did some wolf training with Philip about a year and a half ago. Tell us more about the lone wolf, and how that just doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, we're pack animals, and at our very core. And the lone wolf, which we have bought into this false narrative that's driven by a lot of Hollywood, actually, where we see Rambo and the Lone Ranger, and there's somehow this kind of anti-hero, self-reliant, isolated, usually a man who rides off alone at the end of the movie, and we go, ooh, wow, that's somehow tragic, but powerful. And the reality is it's not powerful. It's just tragic, because the lone wolf just starves to death in about 2 weeks out in the wild, because they're pack hunting, big game eating organisms. And humans are the same thing. We're designed for inherent collaborative reciprocal relationships. Instead of calling it a pack, we call it a tribe. And so when we are isolated from the pack or the tribe, what it does is it triggers a death response in your amygdala, which is that little kind of smoke alarm in the middle of your brain, which its only job is to scan for threats. And that big threat is isolation, because we know we're going to die if we get isolated. And it's one of the reasons why shame is so painful, because Like when I make fun of you because look at that little girly blue coffee cup you're using, ha, and you go, oh, I'm ashamed because now I don't feel like I'm accepted because of my blue coffee cup, and now that pain you feel because of that shame is really isolation. The threat of isolation, excommunication, it's a deadly thing. And what happens now is your brain releases a whole ton of cortisol, and that puts you in the preparation for fighting to survive. And the scary part as it relates to this coronavirus is when we get triggered and our sympathetic nervous system goes online, we get ready to fight and flight. What happens is it's shutting off the rest of all of our non-vital functions, such as our immune system, right? Like when you're fighting for your life, it's going to shut down reproductive system, digestive system, immune system. So people who are feeling isolated right now, everybody watching this, if you're feeling isolated, you've got this little feeling in your gut or your heart, your chest. If you're not sleeping well, you're having weird dreams. Like this is us processing trauma, and it's a really good marker of going, I'm triggered now. I need to start hitting my protocol for connection, which is really what I want to talk about with your folks. So don't be the lone wolf. Find ways to connect. Why I wanted to share about shining light on Tribe was I wanted to immediately shine some light on somebody we both know, Sam Morris.
Yeah.
Brother Sam. And he said on a brilliant post the other day, we are not socially distancing. That's the wrong word. We're not socially distant. We're physically distancing.
Right.
So don't get it twisted.
Right.
It's very important to recognize that we are not socially distancing. We need to get tighter than ever. And so,
I just got chills. Like I feel that. I feel tighter than ever with my tribe, with my people, whether it's on Facebook or it's you on a phone call or it's my wife and my son. I feel tighter than ever with people. That's really interesting. That's great.
And there's a lot of ways we can do this that do not involve us physically connecting. Like we have obviously the technology, we have the smarts, we have the wisdom, we have the skills that we can connect through space. We can connect with our ideas, with our values, our vision, our purpose. We can have collaborative relationships. There's a whole host of things we can do that are not in person. And happy to share some of those, with y'all.
Philip, what is really interesting to me is that shame trigger, and the propensity to not. I mean, we got started down this path when you were saying, well, at least I heard one part that I heard was this idea to not want to share someone else's win when it's too close to something that I wish I had, or I wish I was successful. I look at some other successful trainer who's got 500 people watching his videos and go, damn it, that should be me. I'm as good as that guy. And I don't, then therefore I don't necessarily want to share that guy's win. I want to compete against him. And yet we're both on the same team.
That's it. And it's really the difference between an average sports team where people are fighting against each other, a bunch of lone wolves, if you want to call it, a bunch of lone wolves under one banner. They don't win championships. Mm-hmm. And if you've been watching the Michael Jordan piece, it
was amazing, wasn't it? It was amazing so far. I thought that the documentary itself is amazing so far.
The big one is, he is the archetypal lone wolf. Like that's him. He is the alpha. He's Lancelot. And you have to realize Lancelot never got the Holy Grail. Lancelot destroyed the kingdom because he was not able to connect to his people. And so Michael Jordan was the same. He was the most ferocious, most competitive, most successful, highest scoring basketball player to come out of college. And he won scoring title, but never won a championship until he got to partner, right, with the Zen master and say, hey, dial down the scoring. You need to pass the ball, play defense, and you need to lead. And you need to start assisting, which is what we just did with Sam. We just tossed him a little assist.
Right.
Like, we could have claimed that quote, like, "Ooh, let me just throw that out of here as how smart I am."
Yeah,
but,
right.
But instead, I get to give Sam an assist. And then what he's going to do is he's going to give me an assist, because now we're in an honor competition of, no, please, this is for you. Oh, no, I will see your honor and I will raise you another shout out.
It's like when you hold the door for someone and they're like, please, no, please.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
please, no, please.
Yeah. And hey, then when you're surrounded by a dozen of those honor competitive people, now you have a dynasty sports team.
But Patriots.
There you go. Yep, that they would be those people who they would take pay cuts to go play for the Patriots.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're signed up for something bigger than yourself, which is, I want legacy. I want the big trophy, right? I'm not trying to hunt rabbits here. I'm trying to hunt an elk. And that's what wolves do. Yeah. And so when we start looking at our lives and what is a project that's big enough that we can all not only want to collaborate on, but need to collaborate on, then all of a sudden we have that sense of kinship and we have that sense of connection. And this is really the big driver of resiliency and connection through big challenges like this that we're all facing.
What do you think, just on the subject of the Michael Jordan documentary, where they ended up the end of the second episode with Scottie Pippen's last year of his contract, and he's about to, I don't remember what happened.
I didn't see it.
Oh, you didn't see the second episode?
No.
So I'll just set it up really quick. Are you going to watch it?
Maybe.
I mean, it's not a surprise. It's historical. You can go back and research it, whatever. But he plays 6 years of his 7 years. He's one of the lowest paid players in all the NBA, and yet he's number 2 in almost everything on the Bulls, on this championship team. And he signed the contract very intentionally because he wanted the security of the guaranteed payment to support his family, to support his loved ones, and but it appears to me that it started to get to him. He's 100. He's like arguably the number 2 player in all of the NBA, because he's number 2 to Michael Jordan, and they're winning. They've won 5 out of 6 years of championships, and yet he's like the 122nd ranked pay player. And he's entering into his last year of his contract. He decides to wait to get surgery until the beginning of the season, which knocks him out for like 50 days, and he could have had it at the end of the season before. And then he's about to come back, and he's saying, I'm not going to play for the Bulls anymore. I'm not going to, it appears to me like something clicked, something shifted. He shifted from this state of team to this state of me.
Yeah. And, well, I'll share with you, just from a psychological platform, what happens when people are not able to express their needs or express their hurt. Like, that's really what it is. The reality is he's making more money than 99.9% of humanity. So yeah. Shut up. But number 2, the comparison is the part that was hurting him, and what it tipped into is resentment. Yeah. And so as soon as we're not able to express our wounds and our pain, whether they're legitimate or not, right? Because to complain about how many millions of dollars you're making is what the Buddhists would call illegitimate suffering. However, pain is pain. And so, my pain, which you might say that's not real pain, it's still real pain for me. So yes, he's in pain, and there's some trauma in there. And when you cannot express that, or it's not resolved, it becomes resentment. And when resentment festers long enough, it becomes contempt. And at that point, it's game over. You start looking at separation in any kind of marriage, family counseling, or therapeutic work. When there's contempt for the other, you've got a toxic. You're looking at amputation to save the organism. Yeah. And the scary part for me, when I'm and I don't participate in politics on social media. I don't think that that's my platform. But I do. You obviously cannot avoid it in this time, and we have entered that phase of well past resentment, and we're into contempt of the other.
Yeah.
And it's such an incredibly toxic place to be that people need to start looking at that as, well, we need to now, start dealing with bridging or separation. It's really that kind of that level of toxicity. So that's where what it sounds like that documentary is kind of connected to, and it's a really important dynamic for those of us who are now in a month of living with whoever you're living with. You need to share your grievances. You need to be able to share your wounds and your hurts and your fears, because when resentment gets unspoken long enough and it gets to contempt, that's a very, very toxic place to have your relationship. So airing these things with people.
Great position, Philip. Like what are some of the things that will, I was reading some statistic yesterday, there's already influx of divorces going on in China from their period of physical distancing. What are some of the things that you can share with people that they can do in this environment?
Yeah. Well, one of the framing pieces about this quarantine that I think is really important, it's just the impact of perspective is really, really valuable, because our perspective on a situation is literally creating our reality. And from a biochemical level, when I'm looking at this as an enforced quarantine, then I'm feeling isolated. They're making me stay in this house, and they're denying me to going out to the things I would normally or would like to do. And so now I'm feeling like I'm isolated. It's an externally enforced dynamic. Yeah. And so when I'm feeling isolated, then that I have that amygdala trigger. I have cortisol and norepinephrine and adrenaline, and it's very unhealthy for me to live in that state. Now, what's the difference between isolation and solitude?
Solitude in my opinion, is a choice.
Spot on. So those of us that are able to intentionally take the perspective that this is an opportunity for growth, reflection, healing. There's a whole slew of, and probably an endless angles of approach on this situation or any situation that allow us to have a much more holistically healthy response to that. Because when I'm looking at this as my choice, I'm having solitude, reflection, growth, healing. There's a whole slew of things that I know there's a lot of my tribe on Facebook who are looking at this as, this is an incredible gift to reframe my life.
Yeah.
And they're flourishing. They're in better shape. They've done more writing. They're better connected. And then you have the, isolation people. And there's a lot of people cratering and hurting because of that. So that's an important dynamic.
What word that comes to mind for me around that is own it. Own it. Like, make it yours. Don't let someone else's imposition. I imagine, I don't know Nelson Mandela, but I imagine that's one of the ways he made it through, was it 29 years or 27 years of isolation? Yep. He chose it. And same with any of the great people who've written, what's his name from World War II?
Viktor Frankl.
Viktor Frankl, yeah, the Viktor Frankl. Like he in a weird way, you have to choose your state, no matter how bad the condition, and own it as yours.
Frankl, he said one of his famous quotes from that is, when you can no longer change your situation, you're forced to change yourself. So that's the classic hero's journey abyss, where you are no longer able to continue in the manner that you have continued, and you're forced to transform into some other, next level version of yourself. And that's either you're forced through the abyss, or you're choosing to go through the abyss. And it's a radically different process, because birth is always uncomfortable, but it can either be traumatic or it can just be uncomfortable, but it's going to hurt either way.
Yeah, it's hard to choose. I mean, I remember I went through a really tumultuous time last year internally, like around stuff that was going on with the business. And in a bazillion and 10 years, I could never have chosen.
Nope.
It's like it chose me. and I was reluctantly, I mean, I was on for the ride. I was like on a freaking roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I was able to, I remember very specifically, I was afraid at one point to leave my house. I mean, I just was, it was crazy. Like I think of all the places you've been in your life, and you've been a Marine, and you've got courage, and you're great under fire, and like, what? You're afraid to leave your house? Don't be a pussy, you know? And I just remember thinking, okay, I might not be able to do the next day, but I can do the next 15 minutes.
Yep.
And I can do the next 15 minutes after that. And it's funny, my friend told me, Joe Rogan just had one of my former CrossFit buddies, he's a Navy SEAL, Andy Stumpf, on his podcast. And Andy was talking about, he was a former BUDS instructor and Navy SEAL, and he talked about how the guys that make it, there's not a big difference between the guys that make it and the guys that don't. But typically the guys that don't make it through are the ones that can't chunk it down into, okay, I can make it to lunch.
Yep.
Okay, I can make it to dinner. They start looking too big and too broad, and all of a sudden it becomes completely overwhelming. And like, I'll never make it. I'll never get there. And that's kind of what I did. I didn't know. I didn't have a technique. That's just what I stumbled across, you know? And
one of the signature philosophies around what you're sharing is when we don't have a plan for the future. If I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, then I have to prepare for everything. Mm-hmm. And so that is an overwhelming thing for any organism to have to be prepared for. Like, anything could happen if I leave this house. So if I don't have control over those things, if I don't have a plan, even if it's a very hard plan, if I have no understanding or no efficacy of how to engage with things, then it is an overwhelmingly cortisol spiky environment to be in. So we do start, when we're under in chaos, we have to chunk it down to, yes, I can handle these 15 minutes. And there's been some dark times in my life where I was down to, it wasn't 15 minutes, it was the next 15 seconds. Like it was okay, right here, right now. Yeah. I can manage this right now. Put this cup down. I'm okay right now. Yeah. And that was my salvation to get through a lot of, really challenging times of, dealing with sobriety issues and depression issues. So that mindfulness, or that, it's a meditative gift. It's a painful awareness, but you realize you can get through anything right now. There are no problems right now. And I'll throw that gauntlet down. Right now, there are no problems. Now, people who are in bad situations or challenging situations, right, who are watching this, you can say, yes, there are. My life is filled with problems, but not right now. There are no problems right now, ever.
Right.
There are situations right now, always, but there are never problems right now. Problems are inherently future based. Right. So right. That was if you want to look at the neurobiological definition of the apple that we ate in the garden, it was time. We understood time. And the moment you understand self and time, welcome to anxiety. You cannot avoid it. Right. That was the curse or the metaphor of that mythological story.
The metaphor, the apple represented time, or
self-awareness. It represented self-awareness, which is metacognition, and what comes along with this is metacognition, prefrontal cortex, temporal lobes, awareness of time. So when you take self-awareness and what's going to happen in the future, and ultimately death, that's what's happening in the future. We're all going into the.
Is that what's happening now? I mean, is that if you extrapolate out all these fears that people have right now, is it ultimately a fear of dying that is the
always? It's always the fear of dying. Now that's the ultimate big boogie monster, is that thing, right? Yeah. And usually it's going to be disguised as I'm not successful, I'm inadequate, I'm not accepted, I'm going to be abandoned. Like those are all the robes that death wears. But ultimately, yes, the tunnel that we're all going into is death, and that's hardwired into the existence of our organism, is to attempt to avoid death. So my dog isn't worried about death because she does not have a prefrontal cortex and no temporal lobes. So she doesn't understand time and she doesn't understand self. So she's living in this moment all the time, which means she has no depression and no anxiety. Whereas we have been cursed with remembering the past and having all those regrets, and then also projecting the future and all those anxieties. And so that's also the source of our power, by the way, is that we can learn from the past, we can plan for the future, and hey, give me that planet, because now I can do these things which are divine. But the curse of that is depression and anxiety, and that is the yin yang of our journey.
Right.
We got weird. Sorry, man. I didn't mean to go there.
No, it's good. It's good. Like every time, like when you were on my podcast, we went down some wormholes. I mean, it was one of the longest podcasts I think I'd recorded. And I love those wormholes. But I have to, I also have to, now I'm trying to fit these conversations into 30 minutes and it's freaking hard.
Yeah.
So some practical things. I know we talked about owning it and creating solitude for yourself and not isolation.
Yep.
Not imposed by someone else. What are some other suggestions you have for this?
Great, cool. Okay, the first one is a sense of belonging allows people to be collaborative and resilient. So the resiliency that is built from a sense of belonging is one of those things that every culture that has been classically resilient has had. So, a nice example in World War II, when the Blitz of London, the Germans firebombed them every night to break their spirit. And what happened is the British actually, this was really well documented, had a substantial drop in clinical anxiety and depression and all sorts of mental emotional health symptoms.
Which seems backwards.
Yeah, they lived in the subways of London every night, but their morale and their sense of resiliency was higher than ever.
Right.
And so it's actually a big study of like, wow, they firebombed them to break their spirit, but they actually just welded them together. Yeah. And that's called trauma bonding. And so it's a maybe this is kind of maybe where we'll end with this, just because it's a good analogy of we're being corona bombed. So it will either separate and destroy us, or it will weld us together and we'll be more resilient. So how and why did that example function? And it's been the same throughout prisoners of war. It got them stronger together, or it broke them. One of the two, and it seems to be two different game plans or modalities.
I remember the Titans. Very similar when he put them through the boot camp, and they had to get along like it seemed very similar thing. Yep.
So, how a sense of belonging is created from those of you who are either the head of a family or you're part of a company right now, and whether it's isolated or not, that you create that sense of belonging. And I would almost use the term belonging as a synonym for kinship. And this is a tribe function. People who are part of a tribe, and that could be the Bulls, right? That could be the New England Patriots. It could be the Marines. These are all honor-based tribe organizations. Now, if you want to create that infrastructure for your family or for your community or for your company, then there seems to be three big pillars that culturally create that infrastructure. It's like putting rebar in your cement. And the first one is you need to have a shared purpose. This is the big North Star that we're navigating off of. It's the big why that Simon Sinek talks about. Mm-hmm. It's again, to quote Viktor Frankl, if you have, if oh, sorry, Nietzsche, not Frankl. Nietzsche says, if you have a strong enough why, you can withstand any what. Like, you will survive if you have that reason to. Children do that for us. It's one of the reasons why having a child elevates your psychology. You go from adolescent to mature psychological function very quickly, because that child and the raising, right, of that child, it gets you up in the morning when you need to. It's like, okay, feed the baby. And even if you didn't want to get up, if you had a hard time waking up your whole life, when you have a child, you do that shit, right? So that sense of purpose is massively important, and you need to share that. You need to express it. You need to reiterate it. You need to constantly say, this is what I and we are about. So just, you ring it like a bell. And what that does is it provides hope, right? Beyond just us doing something together and collaborative, and we're hunting big game, it provides hope. And that optimism is the antidote for pessimism and fear. And Napoleon said a leader is a dealer in hope. That's what they do. So, number one, vision, purpose, meaning, whatever you want to call the big why, you need to do that. Number two, how are you going to go about doing that? And that's your values. And your values are equally as important as what your vision is. And your values are almost the thing that defines what you stand for. It welds you together with a sense of belonging with other people who share those values. And I've been with my tribe, and I have a couple organizations that I partner with. The more often we reiterate those values, the more people can go, yep, I'm in. I know what to expect. I know how to behave. I know what I'm aspiring to be. And so for me, my top two values are growth and service. And I think that without growth, then we're anemic and we're not able to serve. And without service, then our growth has nothing that it fulfills. So it actually guides our growth. Mm-hmm. So vision, reiterate that. And as a family, you have a vision. Similarly, reiterate and double down on your values, because again, whether it be family or company, those are going to shape your decision making and your behavior. And even if they're hard and they're aspirational values, it at least gives people something to be able to navigate off of. And right now we're flying through the dark on instruments alone. And
Philip, what are your well, first of all, would you share what your family's values are? Do you have words that are your values?
For me, it's going to be growth and service across the board with everybody and everything that I do in my life. I'm not decreeing that to people. And for me, though, they're big enough that those buckets have a lot of different ways that people can align on them. Some people are going to look at growth as intellect. Some people it's going to be fitness. Some people it's going to be career growth. There's a lot of different ways to look at growth, but I do believe that humans are predators. We've got eyes in the front. We like to hunt, and we want to explore. We want to advance. We want to flex into our life and express ourselves. For me, that's growth. And my wife's vision, her definition of growth is going to be very different than mine, but it's still growth. Like, we're not playing defense over in the Folsom household. And the same thing with my daughter.
But do they have their own versions of their own values that are unique to them? Or
they have their own different definition of what growth and what service is.
Okay.
And my version of service is doing this with you today, or some version of this. Right. Their version of service, my wife's version, is very different. She does not want to be on this podcast projecting our vision of the world out to the world like you and I are doing, right, with our kingly, psychology. Yeah. So her version of service is much more inward focused on family and vitality and taking care of her tribe. Like, she's got that lover archetype. And so her service is very different, but it's still about you're taking care of something besides yourself always.
Right.
And that's as a parent, that's our job, is to make sure that we're impressing the value of our values upon our children and allowing them to explore what that means in their lives. And there's going to be some struggle with that, but that's parenting. Yeah. And it's also leading. It's all, I mean, if you're in charge of a team, that's your job also. That's what Phil Jackson did to Michael Jordan. Right. He said, he pivoted Michael Jordan's values to ones that were more exalted and more effective. So
we have purpose, right? Yep. Number one, then we have values.
And then the last one, which we alluded to in the beginning of this, is what your mission is. It's the jobs that you're doing. And when I can involve my friends on my projects, then they are going to be more involved with me. And you and I would not be hanging out today and having this fun bro time, except you involved me in your mission this morning. And so energy cannot travel through a vacuum. Sound dies when it hits space. So the same thing is true with our relationship. The energy of our relationship has to have a medium through which the wave can travel, and that's projects. We need to involve each other in our projects. So the
puzzle that I just saw you guys finished, that we're still struggling with. We have a 2,000 piecer that we're just kids crushing us, but that's a project.
Yep, absolutely. And it just allows people to joke together and to have frustrations together and celebrate some little successes and tease each other and whatever the dynamic was going on. Yeah. The puzzle is the medium, artificial, that allows the energy of your family to be able to exchange. And that's belonging. That's kinship. So whether or not we're chewing hides together back at camp, or we're, gathering, beats, or whatever it is that we're doing, that's the medium through which we exchange our humanity.
When you say mission, it's not necessarily a mission statement. It's a mission, like mission is let's do this puzzle, right? Is that, am I getting that right?
Yeah, or let's do this podcast. Let's do this promotion. Right. Let's let me loop you in on let me have you write a blog for my website, and I'm going to make sure that you're cited and elevated. Yep. And us doing this together now allows that sense of belonging that is resiliency. So purpose or vision, whatever you want to call that, your values of what is important to you in terms of how you think the world should be led, and then having collaborative, reciprocal projects. And those three things allow a greater sense of kinship and belonging, family, community, and it allows us to be able to survive through almost untold amounts of trauma. And I can say that authoritatively because we're still here.
Right.
We are undefeated. We're 10,000-0.
Right.
Humanity. Right. And we have gotten through all of these challenges with our connection with each other and our commitment to our mission, vision, and our values. We're undefeated with that. And that's how we're going to defeat this one, because that's our destiny. We're not going out.
Right. It's beautiful. It's a great place to end.
There you go.
Philip, thank you. Like I said, this is a wormhole that I could spend the next 6 hours just talking with you about.
Yeah.
You get sick of me after a while. But thank you for your service. Thank you for your contribution. Thanks for your wisdom and knowledge and sharing it with the world. And I really appreciate you, brother.
Back at you. And hey, I have a whole bunch of resiliency reflections that are Facebook Lives, and they're on my website, and they're all free, and they have notes on them. So if anybody wants to go down,
is it wolftribe.com? What's the website?
mywolftribe.com, and there's a resiliency page that's got like 10 Facebook Lives with some notes and some there's a top 10 resiliency list of things that if you want to explore more of this.
Very cool. Awesome. Is that the best place to, if people have questions after this, should they find you on Facebook? Should they find you on Instagram? Where are you?
I'm on all those platforms. Yeah. So Wolf Tribe is on Facebook here, or it's on Instagram. I'm Philip Folsom as well. And so if anybody wants to chat with that, I'm on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to on the website, mywolftribe.com as well.
Sweet.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks again. And
happy Wednesday
for tuning in.
Hey, the hair's looking good.
Oh yeah, there it is. I love it. The wall clippers do a great job in a pandemic.
Yeah, there it was. All right, guys. Talk to you soon, brother.